Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. This is a special edition because we have a special guest. We have Fly Jamerson on the show. Welcome to the show.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
It's so true. Fly, we got to get into it because you say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true. You have been over the past couple of years one of the most outspoken listeners of the show. No, it's true. I want to say this with all honesty. We have a lot of listeners. Thank God. I appreciate all of you, but very few of you actually post about it. I know there's hundreds or thousands of you listening to this right now. Uh, and for some reason, it doesn't push the needle enough for you to share on social media or with your community about this episode. So maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe you just enjoy
No,
it, but
no,
uh,
no, no.
but but Fly has been the one who has, dozens of times actually shared different episodes that she's posted. Went through a period a year or two ago where she literally binged Weiss Advice from the beginning. Literally went back, the 470 episodes we're in right now. Went back to the beginning and like listened, 10 episodes a day or something like that. So that was crazy. Anyways, that's our intro to Fly. She's much more than that, but it's just a curious point I wanted to bring out, and we'll get more into it. And she's wearing, for those of you watching this, she's wearing the swag, the Weiss Advice,
I
which you can
am.
get also as well if you go to my Instagram. The link tree has actually a link where you can get your own. You don't just need to get it sent to you free from the host. You can buy it too. But without further ado, Fly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the real estate world? Because from what I know about you, it was a very unconventional way to find your way to real estate.
It was unconventional, and I will say for the record, I don't think that you're doing anything wrong in terms of, what I think that, you obviously I hold this podcast in very high regard. Um, when I got into commercial real estate, and to be clear about what I do besides just listen to Weiss advice, is I work in social media marketing for commercial real estate brokers and other professionals. And when I started in the business, I had come from a background. I was a writer and producer in theater, film, and television for about 15 years. I was a college professor. And then, different things happened in the world. COVID, I became a mom, and I decided I would like to make some money. um, and so I ended up getting into social media marketing. It was something that was very accessible to me, and a lot of my skills from, having an arts and writing and producing background applied there, and I could do it from anywhere in the world. And so I started working as a social media coordinator for a brokerage in
Mhm.
Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I live, and quickly discovered that there was something extremely interesting happening in commercial real estate. And I didn't know it was there. I had no idea that like all these people existed. Like I had never heard Bob Knackle's name.
Mhm.
And when my original boss, like I went to him on my first day, I was like, what am I supposed to do? And he was like, we like kind of like what Bob Knackle does. And so I started studying, just devouring as much content as I could, because there was so much of it suddenly. Like, Bob had just recently, when I got into the business, he had just recently left JLL and joined BKREA. I started following Mo Regalado, who, of course, I'm now, a part of Mova Media Marketing, the agency. And so I entered into the business in a very non-conventional way and actually started creating relationships through the like active consumption of content like yours.
Mhm.
And that's really the power of social media. And so it's been a really kind of wild rocket ship ride for I'll only have been in the business for 2 years in May of this year in 2026. So yeah, it's been really, really crazy. And
Yeah,
I'm just getting started, so it's pretty wild.
it is wild and it's awesome. And I love it. The fact that, like you said, you came from a really different field. right? Teaching and producing and it's media in itself, in terms of theater, and I know you're involved in that world for a long time, but it's very different. But I want to share, just briefly, because I remember clearly how I first came across you, which was through this series of cold calling that you did last year, 2 years ago, where you had it was again really in your first job in the real estate world, and you had this cool series where you were cold calling people, and you had cold called. I saw this video through Aviva, who was someone that I knew. I had as a guest on my podcast a few years ago, and I knew she was huge on social media. And then I saw it through her, like you a video of yourself cold calling her, and just learning from different people and professionals in the real estate world, which was amazing. It was very different, and that's one thing that stands out because social media, it's like what stops the scroll? What's going to get you to like, oh, this is different. Let me look at this. Let me, you know, be enthralled by this. And that series was incredible. I loved it. And like I literally immediately reached out to you because I was like, this is very unique. I don't remember exact wording that I said. I could probably go back and look at the DM, but
Oh, I know exactly actually what you said because this was an incredibly formative moment in my career when this happened actually.
wow.
And
Okay.
what was interesting about that particular call, so the cold call and cold callers series, which has kind of come back to life. I've rebooted it a little bit, and it's something now I'll actually be pursuing, even like putting my focus back on that in my work at Mova Media Marketing. But I needed a way to make content without leaving my desk, and I was really looking for inspiration from what brokers already do and how do brokers drive business. They pick up the phone, and so I was like, all right. I'm going to try to turn this into some content. And that is a lot of what I do in my work as, a social media person in commercial real estate is like, look at what are the specific ways that brokers and other professionals already win business and
Hmm.
translate that into something that's legible on social media. But
Yeah.
so that's a different thing. But so I also I'm terrified of public speaking. I'm terrified of talking on the phone. I'm less so now, but like, I just started what it was that my boss had dared me to cold call Bob Knackle. And then I couldn't get through to Knackle, so I started calling all these other people, and Aviva picked up the phone. And that was what I would ask on those calls. I would say like, "Hi, this is me. I'm doing this. I'm making a video asking for advice. What's the best advice that you got when you're just starting out?" And it's going to be in a video online. Aviva's advice was to pick up the phone. And I had actually gotten the courage to even call her to begin with because about 10 minutes before I decided I was going to pull the trigger and call her, I was listening to the episode that she had done with you,
Oh,
which
wow.
is how I knew who you were when then you commented on the video. And then on that video, you suggested that I listen to some of like the landmark episodes of Weiss Advice where you have all of those people on, like the 200th episode of Weiss Advice, and it's like
Oh,
the
right.
big
Yeah.
group, episode.
Yeah.
Um, the next day I had to stay home sick from work and I was like really ill, so I was kind of like laid out and just like but I still want to do something. I'm like I always want to be, consuming something because I just like I can't keep my brain still. Anyway, I listened to all those episodes and I listened to all these people who were, a part of, the sort of history that you've collected over the last 5 or 6 years in this business. And I was like, that is, I need to know absolutely everything about all of these people. And then the next day I started day one of listening to Weiss Advice.
That's
Really
incredible.
crazy. Yeah.
That is. And wow. Okay. So this is really like a full circle moment right here.
Yes. It's crazy.
That is crazy. Wow. And I don't think I knew that you had listened to the episode where Aviva was on my podcast before you had cold called her. And then seeing
Oh,
my comment on your post like that next day probably was like mind blowing.
yeah, it was like, say, Beetlejuice three times and he shows up kind of deal, right? Like, No, but that's the thing. I think that, a lot of people who are trying to figure out, okay, how do I do, social media and commercial real estate is like they're really, everybody that you see online who is posting who you feel like you either want to be or like maybe you can't emulate, like they're just people, right? They're all real people having real conversations, having real transactions, and they all started from someplace. But I think I think sometimes that is one of the things that keeps people from like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah, it's true. And one thing that you said earlier in terms of just kind of figuring out like what you're going to do is trying to translate what you're already doing into social media content. And it gets easier. This is one of the biggest questions that people ask me all the time, especially when I do the 10-day challenges, where you've been a part of that, which is how do I come up with content? And what I always say is, share your journey. But what does that mean literally? What does share your journey mean? It just means take the things that you're already doing and just turn it into content. And it gets easier every time you do it because you start seeing things in a different light. You start seeing the things you're doing as something I can post about. And it's really amazing. Like, take this for example. We're on a podcast right now. I just took a screenshot, selfie of the two of us, you wearing the Weiss Advice t-shirt. Like that for me, that's an easy, besides for the
Easy.
obviously the podcast itself, which is going to be, several pieces of content. Uh, which, by the way, just a side thing, a great way to get content is go on podcasts or be on podcasts. And that's really a huge way how I built my LinkedIn following was just being on podcasts. And a lot of the content early on was just, taking selfies on the podcast and saying that I was on a podcast. And that itself is, but again, it's part of what are you doing today? What have you done? Did you make a cold call? Did you send an agreement? Did you have a conversation with someone? Anything that can be shared and people can learn from that. And it's more about sharing yourself and who you are, because in the end of the day, it's about who people want to do business with.
Yeah, your network is your net worth,
I've
right?
heard, I've heard
I
that
love it.
before. I've
I've
heard
heard
that
that before too somewhere.
on a
But you,
t-shirt somewhere.
and
Yeah.
you're wearing it. You are, I think one thing that when we have a lot of people have a lot of conversations about, you know, just share what you already do or be authentic or there's a lot of kind of high level kind of approaches to how you go about this, and what you say is exactly right. That's what makes the best content. Like Mo all the time says, real conversations equal real content. And Mo Regalado, who is the CEO of Mobile Media Marketing, for those of you who don't know, and looking at what happens in front of you, if you're looking for an example of how to actually do that, Yona does it all the time. I always love your stories of when like you had a conversation with somebody on the phone, or it was just like a remarkable exchange that, it captured your attention. It was significant in some way. And I think that a lot of times really what the skill is it's not that they don't know, they don't have anything to write about. Everybody has so many amazing stories, and it's really about getting into the practice of noticing what are
Yes.
those things that are, you can't get out of your brain. What are those conversations that, seem to, get your gears turning? And usually the things that you already focus on in your own mind are the things that other people are going to be interested in too. So, you give a lot of, advice on the high level, right, which I love, but then also you yourself practice that advice. And so I think that, people can really look to you and obviously many others, for actually practically how to do that.
Sure. You're absolutely right. And you've obviously shown how you've, learned to do that and have done that very successfully as well. Just sharing that, talking about how you spoke to a broker, you had a cold call, or you had this, or spoke to one of your clients and shared those stories and those experiences. And it's funny because, at a certain point, it's like there's too much content. It's like, what do I, how do I take one thing out of that conversation or one thing out of the many conversations I've had and turn that into something? And that's, it may not be the challenge that everyone is facing right now, but it certainly can be a challenge at some point. But starting, just doing it, just putting your foot out there. I love to do that. And you've having joined Mo in the mobile media world, you've kind of taken a new direction a little bit in your own right self and how you're actually sharing content for other people on multiple ways. Meaning, in previous jobs, maybe you just you were a social media manager for a brokerage, and then for another commercial real estate company, and so it was like you're focused on like sharing their story, right, and sharing like what they're doing. And yes, you can bring out your own personal brand and your own personal insights through that. But now you're actually the voice behind many people, which I don't even know. It's funny because I'm sure I consume content and I'm like, wow, this guy's amazing. And it's really just Fly. Um, you know,
Well, you want to know what? I actually disagree that it's me at all. And the reason I say this is because I do, I have a client who we have a lot of conversations about like what am I supposed to say to somebody who's like, "Oh, you have somebody who's doing your social media?"
right.
And it's, everything that we produce as an agency comes directly from the client. It's just that there is a difference between saying, there's a difference between what you already do in the world, how you already talk to people, all the other channels that you present yourself in. You already do that extremely well in the real world.
Mhm.
It's a little bit trickier on social media in a
Right.
media format because it's not just you talking to somebody one on one. Like it's amazing what brokers can do with just their words.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put it onto the internet, you're dealing with captions, SEO, placement of text, all the editing, cross-posting it on a million platforms. And it can be really, really powerful because it increases the surface area of visibility of
Mhm.
that remarkable conversation where you're producing results out of words, right? But it's making it visible, but you have to play by the rules and conventions of the format. And that's what we do.
Okay.
And so, like,
So
yes, it is
it's not, yeah,
Fly. Yeah,
it's
it's
their
not.
voice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in any of our clients' DMs being like, oh, hey, it's Bob. What's up? Emoji, emoji. That's him. That's him. Okay. Like, so, but, no, and you want to know what? I think that I've had such success at it is because of my background in, studying media, studying stories, studying advertising, studying just like how do people communicate and understanding, what are the conventions of the format? What are the rules? What do people
Mhm.
expect out of this? How do we get this, it's the reason why something will work as a book, but not as a movie.
Right.
Right. And so it's like figuring out, what are the different, like, how are things supposed to go together here? And, there's often, opportunities to, innovate inside of that. But it's just about, figuring out how do we say this message in a way that makes sense on this platform. So that's what
Yeah.
we do. And we
Awesome.
do, I mean, we do it really well. And we have a lot of fun, but
Obviously,
I don't
it's
know.
clear. It shows
It's,
through, especially when you and Mo have the morning conversations, which you guys host this great little podcast. You want to talk about that a little
yeah,
bit?
we
The
do every
social surge.
Tuesday, every Tuesday, Thursday, at 8 a.m. Central, and you can conjugate all of the different time zones you need to out of there is Social Surge, where Mo and I go live and we talk about current events as well as different tools and methods and ideas all about digital marketing and commercial real estate. And so it's very much advice about social media, but it's
Mhm.
also like I remember when all that stuff was going on with the TikTok ban. We were talking about that, or there's absolutely a lot to cover.
Sure.
And, Mo and I, we're obsessed with social media in the same way that if you're, working with a specialist who, is dedicated to a specific asset class, like they're going to know how to get results in a different way. So we're just social media nerds, but it's really, again, all about connecting it to the actual business goals that our clients have, which are it's not to go viral. It's not to be famous. It's
Mhm.
to sell buildings, right? And it's to create opportunities for conversations to begin, for relationships to begin
Right.
that start on social media. You're not going to sell a building from a Facebook ad, but you might be the person, you might meet the person that you're going to transact with. And
Yeah.
really that's what we're all about. And, so it's been I feel like in many ways I'm kind of entering my sophomore year of commercial real estate, starting with a splash and doing a lot of really fun events and stunts and other things. And like I think all of that's really important, but I'm really dialed in right now
Yeah.
in because I see the capacity for the level of success that people can get if they're active on this platform. Um,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, to kind of borrow your analogy of being your sophomore year, I mean, like you said, you've only been in this business in less than 2 years in the commercial real estate world, which is crazy because I feel like you have a huge presence already in the world. I mean, go to the CREI summit, which has a lot of the big, commercial real estate influencers there, and you're like center stage. Obviously you helped in planning it on the planning side of things, so that helps. But you know, drawing upon that, I mean, you're obviously the president of the Weiss Advice Fan Club, which is, something that, not everyone can claim fame to, but you can accomplish so much more when you look at it like, hey, I'm just starting out. And I think that's one quality that I love about you, which is just the humility. You've accomplished a lot. You have a big name, yet you think you're like, what have I even done? I'm like not even close to reaching, what we're beginning to do. And I know, and I truly mean that sincerely because it's a quality that I look at myself as one of the qualities that I like about myself. And I feel like if someone wants to be successful in life and in business, you need to be humble. You need to realize, and the definition of humility, which I believe the true definition is not what some people think of thinking lowly of yourself. No, it's thinking that I have only just begun to scratch the surface of what my potential is and what I'm doing, and that's really humbling when you think about that in true light. And I can definitely say that about you because I see that, and you have accomplished a lot. But yeah, you are just really starting out in the same light. And so looking at that from that perspective kind of gives people also a lot of hope and opportunity for themselves. Like, hey, yeah, there's so much more to accomplish in this world, And Gary V, who I love, and I know we've talked about this. Like he talks about it a lot. Like, what you're 40 years old, you're 30, I don't know, whatever, how it doesn't matter. But just in general, like, oh, and you think like you have like 50 years left in your life to like be successful like you've just started. Like anyone can start over. I know my father, for example, he started a new career at 67. Okay, well,
I
most
love
people
that.
like retire, and he's like, no, like I'm like he just changed it up. He's like, no, I want to start something new, and was very successful at it and loved it. And it's and it's I mean I think he's been, but again, anyone can start anything at any time.
Yeah, and there's an extremely low barrier to entry in this business that I find, some people really capitalize on that opportunity. I was able to completely change my life and 10x my income in less than 3 years. Really. And it was possible because it's in this vertical. There's no other vertical, in my opinion, where that's possible. But there is a level of humility by your definition that's definitely required. And you also have to have hunger and you have to have hustle, right? Like when I look that, and that is something that I really learned by listening to, I think at this point it's like 300 episodes of the show that I've
Right.
listened to, right? And like every single person who comes to that conversation has really like, I mean, we're all obsessed. And so I think that there is so much opportunity in this business. I just last night had a conversation with somebody who, they're new in the business. They don't know how to kind of navigate it. They don't have any kind of background in finance or in corporate or in business or in anything. Like they were an art kid just like me,
Hmm.
right? And I'm just like, this is amazing that you found this out because there are so many of your skills that you are going to be able to use here. And it was very exciting when I did start to put, myself out there. And it still is a little, I still prefer to talk about my work and about my, the people that I serve as opposed to my own story, but that's a different thing, right? But every time I post from those cold call videos, I get somebody who DMs me, and they're usually either somebody new in the business or like, somebody who's quite tenured who, doesn't put themselves out there.
Right.
And that, like, people would start messaging me about how meaningful it was to them that, like, I was producing that kind of content, which was really about, asking the most excellent people in the business, like, how did you get where you are? Because I know it wasn't easy,
Hmm.
and then, also like, when you put yourself out there and it's something that is maybe beyond your comfort level. I mean, other people really notice that.
Yeah.
Other people really notice that effort. And it's the same reason why, a young broker who doesn't give up is just like they're just going to make it. If they can just keep a smile on their face and just like get past, all of the doubt, all the rejection, all of it. I don't know. I mean, I didn't see enough content like that in the business. And you were somebody, that when I got here was producing that kind of really, truly optimistic content that was about, people collaborating for their greater good. And I see a lot more now, right? Like look at Gabe Einhorn, look at
Yeah.
any of these,
Exactly.
look at all these new voices that have come up that are really, really positive. It's great.
Love it.
Who knew commercial real estate?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
amazing.
well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about it is just the people, right? There are so many amazing people, and the fact that every single person that I've had as a guest on my show are people that I already knew beforehand, right? And I get pitched every single day from like these podcast connectors and whatever, like, oh, have so and so on your show and whatever, and I reject every single one of them because I want to have conversations with people that I already know, and have met, or because there are so many great people in this industry, and we all have so much to share, and I love it. You've, as you said, so, self-proclaimed fan of the show. Are there any episodes or one that kind of stands out at you? I mean, for me, it's so hard because I love every single episode. I love every conversation. If I were to personally, and I'm just saying this so you have time to think about it, this filler, um, for me, the bonanzas that I did on the 200th and 300th episodes respectively, where we brought back all the guests. Well, not all came back, but we had like 40, 50, 60 people that came back and each one shared like, a 30-second snippet. I love those. Those were so much fun.
Those were amazing. And those were, I think, actually, like I said, the first episodes that I listened to on the show. And then I went back and I started with number one. And there were some days that I would like load up 6 or 7 episodes of the podcast, and I would like every weekend I have a dedicated day where I like clean my house. Everything in my house, I clean it. And I just like would pop in Weiss advice and just listen to hours and hours, right? But I do have my own personal Spotify playlist of the best of Weiss advice. And there's like 20 or 25 episodes on there. But I have to say that the one that always comes to mind as the one that really impacted me the most was the episode with Mikey Taylor, and specifically his answer to the final of the final four questions,
Mm.
was talking about and it's a story or kind of a metaphor that I've heard, an idea that I've heard other places, but that the idea of success, his definition of success, that being when he reaches the end of his life, that and he's going to ascend to, meet his potential,
Hmm.
right? Like the spirit, like the I'm getting a little emotional, so my words are getting tongue-tied, but his definition of success and the way in which it was, meaningful and spiritual and all about, what am I going to do in my lifetime to make sure that I don't leave any stone unturned. And I was standing holding a laundry basket in my hallway, and I just stood there. Right. And you told me before we got on the show today that I wasn't allowed to cry, but I did. I cried in my hallway while I listened to your podcast because, you know, like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
So that's my favorite one, I guess.
I'm so glad you shared that. That's awesome.
Because that's what I want to do too. That's not my definitions of success, but that's what I want to do too with my life. I want to reach my highest potential.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
it.
that's what we all want to do. I mean, we all want to like serve our purpose on this world, and for most of us, it's spending most of our life to trying to figure out what that purpose is. But once you've found it, and someone like Mikey who had like an incredible career as a professional skateboarder, and then like found business and real estate and now politics. I don't know if you know this, but you're following his story
Yep.
still, but he's now like the mayor of Thousand
I
Oaks.
know it's crazy. And I think that's also why I related very much to his episode because, that's it's very similar to my story. And a lot of people have the story of just like we came from someplace else and we found it and we're gonna stay here. So I don't know.
Wow. Well, with that, I want to transition myself now, what we like to call the final four. And obviously, you know what these questions are. But first one for you, Fly, is going to be what is the worst job that you ever had?
I was a receptionist at a music nonprofit, and one of my jobs was to take care of the office parrot, and the office parrot bit me on the nose.
No.
And that was the worst job that I had ever had because I just don't bird violence was involved in a situation where it should not have
Yeah.
been. That is honestly I've had every job imaginable under the sun. I've scrubbed toilets, I was the line, manager at a donut factory. Like, I used to I've done a lot of really different things and I loved all of it. I love work and the thing also that I really learned, listening to this podcast, and hearing all these people talk about the worst jobs is that usually the worst job taught you a lesson you needed to learn.
Yes.
So it but I don't know what the lesson is with getting bit by a parrot on the nose.
The lesson for me would be do not get within biting distance of parrots.
This only on Weiss advice.
You heard it here first. Second question, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
Mine's kind of controversial. Do you want to hear it?
I can't say no. So, yes, of course I want to
Well,
hear it.
I've heard about, 60 people say rich dad, poor dad on this podcast. And so, which, I think there, I've read a lot of things and, coming into this business again, trying to learn absolutely everything I could in a
Sure.
short amount of time. But I feel like I'm sort of breaking the rules of Fight Club when I say this, but the paradigm shift was 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. You know
Hmm.
about this?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody in this business who is new should absolutely read it because, once again, I was hired as like, like just a girl to like work in a marketing department. And what I didn't understand when I started in commercial real estate is like how much of this business is really about power and status.
Hmm.
And that, very quickly you can, you encounter situations in which it's really not about buildings at all. And, people like to say that commercial real estate is not an emotional industry, but I learned more about commercial real estate reading 48 Laws of Power than anything else. And so, I don't know.
Yeah. Love it.
I highly,
Absolutely.
highly recommend it.
Well, that's exactly the point of the question. It's a paradigm shift, and that's was a big one, clearly. So we'll put that on the list there. Check it out. Third question, what's a skill or talent that you'd like to learn?
Do you know how some people can do like math in the air? Like they can just do math in their head?
Yeah, of course, sure.
I can't do that, and I don't think I'll ever be able to, but I would like to do words in the air a little bit better.
Like being able to just
Um,
like spell like spelling
well,
bee.
no, I just mean like extemporaneous speaking, public speaking.
Oh,
I'm like the whole time I've been sitting here talking to you, I'm just like, I'm terrified. It's
no.
still after all this time. But I do believe that it is a skill that can be practiced.
Yes.
And it's actually one of the ways that I'm using AI the most right now is, giving it recordings of, podcast episodes that I do and like the show that I do with Mo and having it, break it down and coach me on different things. And I'm gonna fail. My AI is very strict. They're gonna look at this one and be like, well, but I think that if if you're new in the business, that the best thing you can do for yourself is learn how to better communicate
Yes.
verbally in the moment, which I've learned a lot of that from you. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate that. And speaking is a skill, and you're absolutely right. It is a skill that can be learned, can be honed, and you get better at it. Listening to yourself over is a great way to do that. It, you're going to go back and listen to this episode, and you'll be like, okay, I can improve on, certain things here or
Yeah,
there.
send me your notes.
Well, we'll see about that. Fourth and final question, Fly. What does success mean to you?
There is a moment in like if you're working on, like a play or like any kind of performance, a movie, or you're putting on an event, like say you're putting on a big event or you're about to go give a talk that you've been preparing for. And the moment that the lights go up or the moment that, the recording starts, the second that the thing that you've been planning becomes reality, the moment it enters the world, that's my definition of success. Because like there are so many ideas that people have, so many things they want to do, so many things they want to say, and it just sits there in their brain. It just sits
Mm,
there in their heart, and they never ever do anything with it. And that is really what got me really excited about working with the people that I work with at Movo Media Marketing is that the stories that people have about, what they've done in their work, like are equal in my mind to any of the, great pieces of literature or drama like throughout history. And I had to read all of it. I used to quote Shakespeare at parties. I was an insufferable art school kid for real, but I have read all of the greats cover to cover, and there's no better story than the ones in commercial real estate. And so to me, the more of those things can be known and sort of like, take flight, and go live, like to me, that's success. That there's more of the kind of stories that are going to produce growth. Because that's it. We're sharing stories to
yeah.
create the opportunity for more. And I think that's something that Knackle had said at some point is that, every transaction that he does, it creates the opportunity for more transactions to happen after that. So it has to exist and it has to, create opportunity for more to exist. That's my definition of success.
Wow. Love that. That's incredible because it's very different from like almost every other, and you can, relate to that. It's very different from almost any other definition that I've heard, which it's, like breaking it down on almost like a daily level. It's like, okay, today, can I do something that I never did before? Or can I try something out or finally put into action something that's been in my mind or my heart or say something, and that's truly, phenomenal. That definition of success, kind of a paradigm shift on my own. So thank you for that. Love that. Fly,
Thanks, Yona.
you're a great guest. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. I've been about an hour ago, I was on the phone with Mo, like, what am I gonna do? No, but it's, we're really excited about, all the relationships that we're able to like have with, folks like you because, just you're good people. You're good people. It's good content. I love everything you're doing. I think you should talk a little bit more about cost seg, but you and I can talk about that later.
It's
So
yeah, I could, but I don't. Yeah, I've tried to. Yeah, we can talk about that later. Anyways, let's conclude here, and we'll leave it off with where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want.
they can find me on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram very easily. My name is Fly Jamerson. And actually, I have a new title. I'm the Director of Growth and Partnerships at Movo Media Marketing. So not only am I, doing all of the things, in helping, more content to be out on social media because I'm a content junkie. But I'm really, again, focused on how are we, using social media to get results for our partners, our clients, and the rest of our community at large. So that's really exciting. So Movo Media Marketing. Most of my handles on all the different accounts are Hey, it's Fly, and it's fly at movomediamarketing.com and 225-270-2061. Call
Wow.
me. And if you don't call me, I
You
might
might
call
get
you.
called, you might get on video, cold called. So yeah, check that out. Awesome. Thank you again. Fly has really been a lot of fun. I'm glad you agreed to do this because it's like you said, a bit of a full circle moment, but really been a great podcast. So thank you.
Cool.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thank you all for joining and listening all the way to the end. Once again, remember the best advice comes only when you ask.